All
Yeah.
right. And we will watch folks kind of filter in slowly.
Yeah.
Cozy Friday streams. Hi, Pumpy Heart, usually first commenter. Welcome. Welcome to Friday. Welcome to the Kudomusicology stream. It's me, musicologist slash Dana. And today we are featuring a chapter that I have wanted to do since I started the channel. Um, yeah, gotta check that the chat overlay is working. Absolutely. We are looking today at Megan Lavengood's Timbre, Genre, and Polystylism in Sonic the Hedgehog 3. Welcome. I'm so happy to have you here.
Hello. It's nice to see you. Sorry, I'm just still like logging on to Twitch here.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
clicking the wrong thing. Here we go.
So I became a fan of yours. I think I discovered your work through your dissertation, maybe, or it's possible I
Mm.
saw you give a talk first, and then that clued me into the fact that you were working on like 1980s synth technology.
Yeah.
And where I end up citing you pretty extensively is in my like disease chapter when I talk about Dr. Mario, and I talk about the Fever and Chills tracks.
Uh-huh.
I talk about your stuff on like what sounds cold or hot.
Yeah.
So that
That's so
was kind of
cool.
my first introduction to your work, and I've just always loved it. And I'm so excited to see it come over to video game music since it's all super applicable to
Yeah.
what we're doing here. Where did the timbre thing come from for you?
I think it's I mean, for everybody, I think it's a really important aspect of music that really helps us define like what we like to listen to and what we don't like to listen to, especially in the pop music world. Genres are have such distinct sort of timbral vibes, and initially I was, I was one of those people that didn't decide what I was going to do for my dissertation until like the last possible second. And for a while, I thought I would write about Sufjan Stevens because I was a big Sufjan Stevens fangirl.
I
And what I
loved
really,
Sufjan in college.
yeah, exactly. And so what I wanted to talk about was his use of really like more instrumentation because he brings in a lot of unusual instruments and a lot of synthy sounds, and that was always what appealed to me about him. But I emailed his record label and they weren't able to give me. They were like, so as we'll talk about in a bit, I guess the way that I like to do timbre analysis is to kind of isolate the tracks. And so I emailed them and asked if I'd be able to have access to the master tracks of even just a couple of songs for my dissertation.
Sure.
And they were like, "Sure, that'd be great. I'm sure that'd be fine. Let me just check in and try to get those for you." And then they were like, "Actually, we don't really have what you're looking for because Sufjan likes to use outdated recording equipment to make his
Oh,
stupid indie sound." And I was like,
of
of
course. So
course, sure.
it was like already compiled and like not able to separate. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. They're like, he's
Wow.
recording on weird cassette players and things like that. And I was like, okay, all right.
Like not surprising, but also kind of a
Yeah,
bummer.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So from there, I was trying to look into different options, and then I was like, maybe I'll do like the Hammond B3 organ, and then I was living this. This is while I was doing my PhD in New York City. I was living in this Brooklyn apartment, and it's like, where exactly is this organ gonna go?
Mm-hmm.
Because uh, you live in a one-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn. Um, so that wasn't going to happen. And my advisor was like, you know what would be more attainable for you is a Yamaha DX7. It's only going to cost like $500 used on eBay because they sold a lot of them. So there's a lot of them floating around out there on the used
Mm-hmm.
market. And it's just like it's just a keyboard, so it's not going to take
Yeah.
up an insane
Yeah.
amount of space.
Smaller footprint and all
Yeah,
that.
exactly. Yeah. So that's where I went with that, and yeah, I it all kind of just built up slowly that way. My advisor didn't have a lot of expertise in like timbre, so I was really on my own in that way. But he really knew a lot about '80s music, and so and I always thought '80s music was really fun to listen to, but I wasn't like really serious about it until I did my dissertation and worked with him on that. Yeah.
I love that. It's interesting when folks have an advisor that is like kind of exactly in their field because that was also not my experience.
Right. Yeah.
because I came in like you, not I kind of thought I was going to write on Satyagraha by Philip Glass. And it was just because I had seen a performance and it really moved me. And I was like, oh, glass portrait operas seem cool. So I kind of thought I was going to do minimalism, but I didn't really find anybody who was specifically a minimalist. I just kind of was like, oh, here's a 20th century person.
Yeah, yeah.
So by the time and then I went and thought I was going to do Just Waldo for a while. So I was all over the place. And then by the time I
Yeah.
finally landed on video game music, my advisor was like, actually, Sonic was the one game he had ever played. And yeah, he was like, I played a Sonic the Hedgehog once in college. Like he kind of knew what that
Yeah,
was.
yeah,
But yeah, that was like his only frame of reference. So
yeah.
it is interesting when and even like the questions that they ask because they're not in it can be really
Yeah.
illuminating because you're like making sure that you're able to sort of speak to folks that don't have all of the background and
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
explaining how the tech works and everything. That's super useful. But then also like I had Neil Lerner on my committee by the end, so like I had somebody that did have the specific knowledge that could call me out on
Yeah,
everything. So it's like you want a little bit of
exactly.
both.
Exactly. Yeah, we brought in the outside reader to get the timbre critique in there because it wasn't coming so much from my home faculty.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems like timbre is something that's always very under theorized
Definitely.
because we haven't had the ways of modeling it visually until fairly recently. So, like, you can look at a score and go, okay, those are the pitches and everything. So, like,
Hmm.
we have harmonic analysis building around that, the ability to do that. But I remember timbre being very floaty and
Exactly.
a lot of even still I teach like my undergrads that are non-majors to talk about it in very metaphorical terms,
Yeah.
comparisons to like physical textures.
Hmm.
The voice sounds like butter or velvet or
Yeah.
anything that's really evocative. I'm like that's a really good way to approach timbre without having to do the spectral analysis. But I like that this adds like a really fixed way to look at it.
Yeah, because I think music theorists really want that. And I kept saying while I was writing my dissertation that like really I wanted like a music theorist's approach to timbre because there's a lot of really good approaches that are more holistic and
Yeah.
kind of musicological, and those are amazing too. But I think it's hard for beginners to understand how to approach it in that really like in that way because it requires so much expertise and background sometimes. Um, so so yeah, I was like, what would a music theorist do, kind of with timbre? And that's why I still like to do the spectrogram stuff because I feel like it feels like reading notation a little bit, and we're really used to these visual aids in the field of music theory. So yeah,
Yeah, I find it super helpful, and yeah, it kind of convinces the formalists a little bit. Like,
yeah, for sure.
it feels like something they can grasp. It's less amorphous. And I
But
say
I mean,
this
just
as
like
somebody who
notation.
does lean more, more into having like notation. I love transcriptions, and
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I
I
mean,
use
just
some of the
like
same
with
tools.
notation, it has limitations and you have to be aware of what's not getting captured. But that can often be the source of like interesting analytical questions too. So I don't see that as a reason to just throw it in the garbage, you know. I think we can kind of rehab spectrograms and still use them.
Yeah, and they're never left out on their own. Like you contextualize them really well. Speaking of which, where is my power? There we go. I have to find the window here.
Yeah.
So here's the full citation, first page, all that stuff. I have a digital copy, which lets you check for updates. It's so cool.
Oh
There's
yeah.
a little check for
Really?
update button.
Wow, cool.
Just amazing, and it means that all the links work and everything. I was actually just meeting with a student earlier today, and I was talking about how I I actually prefer having like physical copies of most of my books
Hmm.
because I like writing in them and just apprehending them. But man,
Hmm.
a PDF that's searchable, I like having both actually.
Right. Yeah.
When I'm like, what was that reading? Because I
Yeah,
don't keep things
exactly.
in my head very well.
Yeah, yeah, I'm the same way. So like I know if I'm reading at the computer, I really have to make a very concentrated effort to like not start clicking over to other things. And so having a paper copy is useful for I think those first couple of readings. But then I really want all my notes and stuff to be on the digital copy.
Yeah. And I wanted to feature this one partially because this is one of those Palgrave-Macmillan books that it's not specifically a Ludo volume. And that stuff is always possibly in danger of folks missing it if it's not like a volume devoted purely to Ludo readings or the, J. Smeg or something like that. Some of, I know the one we did, Will's Baroque chapter, that was in another Palgrave thing, and I think he was the only game chapter in there. So and you go to buy it and you're like, oh, this book is expensive, so it's like you get your library to buy it or you interlibrary loan it or something. So I like to feature stuff like this too, because like we need more work on Genesis stuff in general. Kevin Burke can't do it all himself. He does great work though. I love Kevin.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So like exactly, Ryan was like, "Whoa, Sonic 3, like amazing." So I was excited to see this one and to see the extensions of some of the timbre work. So we're gonna have some fun digging through these tracks today. So I think most of us are somewhat familiar with Sonic, right? He's cool. He's got attitude. He's the fastest thing alive. According to the theme song from the 90s. He's not a plumber.
Nope.
Gotta go Schnell. He does what Nintendo don't. Nintendo doesn't. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that was their slogan. Yeah.
Exactly. So 1994, Sega Genesis. And of course the Genesis came out in what, 88, you said?
Is that right?
Is that right? It was so much earlier than it feels like it should be.
Exactly.
Because it's like
I don't know.
peak NES 8-bit land, and then suddenly we get this 16-bit thing showing up on the market.
Yeah. Well, that was the thing. That's why it was like so important. It was like, oh, somebody actually can compete with Nintendo.
Yeah. It seemed almost impossible, after like the crash. Nintendo was the only one to like kind of pull us all out.
Yeah.
And then it was like, oh, Sega. Did you have a Sega growing up?
I actually did not. We were a fully Nintendo household until the PS2. I came over to this because of the technology of it, because the sound chip is the same as the Yamaha DX7. Not the same, but it's very, very similar to the Yamaha DX7, which I had already been studying. So like the sounds were very attractive to me. They were very familiar to me. So that's why I jumped over to the Genesis. And also because, like you said, there's not a lot of work on it. Which was really kind of shocking to me when I was first working on this chapter. I remember going on Twitter and being like, oh, all the Ludomusicology people on Twitter will tell me where all the Sonic research is. And it was like...
It was all probably just the Michael Jackson conspiracy theories.
Yes. And as a side note, it's really hard to search for stuff about music theory, like music research in Sonic the Hedgehog, because
the word Sonic.
Yeah.
Oh man.
So you really kind of need like personal guidance to find research on Sonic the Hedgehog. Yeah.
That is a problem I've noticed with Sonic in particular. But
every time I get an email about the Journal of Sonic Studies, I pretend it's about Sonic the Hedgehog.
Wouldn't that be amazing? Whole journal of just Sonic the Hedgehog. Yeah, so I mean, he was the brand in a lot of ways. He was the big mascot, and he's really trying to be a cool, like, Mario's for babies, come over and play Sonic. Because here's our platformer, and here's our character that eats chili dogs in the cartoon, and it's just like Mr. Attitude, and he has sneakers and stuff.
It's all very 90s.
Yeah, it's got that very like Totino's Pizza Rolls kind of vibe to it. Which, no hate, it's a good vibe. Parents just don't understand.
Now, yeah.
Platformers, of course, as most of this crowd knows, have radically different environments, and yet we don't read that as incohesive, because they're the overall gameplay mechanic, the narrative, and often the music is kind of keeping it going for us, which is kind of interesting, because you look at something like The Witcher, and those environments are a lot more connected, like geographically and otherwise. Like there's city and there's more rural and stuff, but there's not this huge juxtaposition of like, now we're in a carnival and now we're in a volcano that's gonna erupt and now we're here and now we're underwater. But a lot of these platformers really like to differentiate the locales as much as possible because it just allowed for more visual interest and some possibilities for the sound as we're going to see. Yeah, Attitude is absolutely the world of the 90s. Sonic, Power Rangers, Ninja Turtles. Yeah, totally. Yeah, there's a lot of energy spent on MJ, which so much so that like you have to speak to it in this chapter even though it's like not at all what you're here to do.
Right. Yeah, I just felt like if I didn't mention it, everybody would be like, "Did you know?" And I'd be like, "Yes, I knew."
Yeah, you're like, Yeah. I'm fairly convinced by what I've read, but
yeah, it
Sega's
very
gonna
plausible. Yeah,
Sega's gonna continue to deny. So I decided, I always say I've decided your thesis for you. What I've pulled out is thinking your thesis is far-flung locales and their corresponding music contrast this consistency in gameplay, bringing excitement and a sense of discovery to the player's experience. Composed by a team of pop songwriters, the styles represented in the Sonic 3 soundtrack include calypso, funk, carnival, new wave, and prog rock. The soundtrack thus does not cohere in terms of a singular musical genre or category. Instead, the soundtrack is polystylistic and brings forth numerous genre associations. In short, Sonic 3's soundtrack relies on polystylism to artfully enhance player experience.
I think that's the thesis, yeah.
Yeah, seems thesis-y.
Yeah.
I will keep joking, though. One of these days, somebody's going to be like, no, that's not my thesis. You're wrong.
Yeah.
But I will be really excited then to hear what they think, like what they think it is.
Yeah.
Some of these genre and locale connections are more obvious than others. So the Trinidadian soca, is it soca style?
Yeah.
For Angel Island Zone's tropical setting, just a little reminder, this is how that sounds. I love that track so much.
The Sonic 3, the whole thing is just like banger after banger. It's so good.
In pretty much all the Sonic games, there was a consistency. Even when the gameplay started, like we've talked on stream, on the Thursday night streams before about the consistency in gameplay quality. Like there have been a lot of bad Sonic games, but musically, I don't think there's ever particularly been it. Like maybe Ryan is more familiar with the overall series. Like I can't think of a game where I've thought the music wasn't up to par. Music was kind of always on point, even when like the game is like laughable. Some of them are just like very awkwardly deployed. But, some of the recent ones have been really good, but yeah, there's kind of an interesting dip in quality for a while.
Right.
And then another real obvious connection. And I had to quote this because I love this phrase.
I can't believe they let me keep it in.
I love when they let you like keep in the silliest and the most unique parts. Carnival Night Zone borrows the chromatic descending melodic motive from Julius Fuchs's march titled "Entrance of the Gladiators," a tune that is perhaps not well known by the title, but is certainly known by by name, I think, as that circus song that goes do 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 do.
It's supposed to say many.
Many, yes. Sorry for the typos.
That's okay.
I was doing this late at night.
Yeah, that's all right.
So here's that one. I'm sure most of us have played this one, but. I love the beat drop there. Yeah. Boom. And then the pause.
Yeah. So good. I mean, yeah, just really well constructed tunes.
Let's see. Side note, another. Oh yeah, yeah. Anyway, I like offers in the chat to get folks like access to things.
Yes.
Most of us are pretty cool about making sure people have the access if they can. It's all about getting your library to buy a copy of the book.
Yes. Yeah.
But personal libraries, man, you got to know that like this book is a party. Like it has to be something you're using again and again. But if you just need like one chapter for for something you're working on, like it's not feasible to buy all the books.
Yeah.
These edited collections get real expensive. So.
Yeah, I always just email people PDFs if they want them. Yeah.
And you also have your personal website has the transcriptions that we will be covering here for the 2 main tracks.
That's right. I forgot they're not actually in the chapter because they were restricting us like to, I can't remember. It's like a very, very small number of examples.
Yeah.
I was like, but I'm a music theorist.
Right. Man, they are doing that a lot. The book I just did with Lisa Scoggin on music and animation, we were told initially 2 images per person per chapter.
Yeah, wow.
And that included musical, like in other places I've seen images versus musical examples, but they included musical examples as images. And I was like, no.
Don't like that.
And we eventually were able to argue up slightly. So a couple places folks really didn't use very many images. So we were able to kind of donate their images to a different chapter, but like we had to do some rearranging a little bit. And at some point we were able to kind of up it just enough to like get everything we needed. But a lot of publishers do not want to put that stuff in.
Yeah.
Which continues to amaze me that my chapter in the Green Book, I have like 20 musical examples. Because I basically transcribed like pieces of most of the score because it was a game that wasn't super familiar to like US players. And that was kind of my argument for having them. And, you know, a bunch I only excerpt. But I think Will did have to, and Steve had to go to the publisher and be like, there's, you know, this isn't just in here for no reason. It's not just like, look, it's fun. I did all the transcriptions.
Yeah.
Because I like to transcribe entire games worth when I'm working on something, but yeah, I tried to stick to the things I needed. But yeah, if I had done this type of chapter and then been told you can only have 2, I would have cried.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I love the idea of linking to personal website and just being like, these can live here. And
that was the compromise that we reached.
Yeah, I think it works. And that way you can have the whole thing too, instead of just a couple measures.
Yeah.
Which is also sort of a nice thing to be able to see the whole thing in context.
Yeah.
So yeah, we have some obvious genre locale connections, but less obvious are some of the ones that will get treated as our case studies here. Ice Cap Zone. You would think, oh, we're in a winter place, so sleigh bells and like metallic sounds, right? Jingle bells, that kind of stuff. But instead, we get like a new wave sound, which you go, oh, well, yeah, that's cool. That also has the coldness to it.
Yeah,
it's got the harsh, clean, like modern kind of sound, but it's maybe not as obvious initially that it is winter. It's just the coolness overall. So this is kind of like thesis part 2, Electric Boogaloo. In cases such as these, where the relation between the music style and the game setting is harder to discern, the contributions of timbre and its sociocultural connotations are foregrounded. So that's kind of like part 2. And then the walkthrough, which I'm almost never wrong about this because it usually starts with an in this essay or in this chapter in this whatever.
Yes.
Here's the things I will do. I love these statements, by the way. I think it's like ease of reading for people to just be like, okay, you know, we're going to do this and then this and then this.
Yeah, it always feels really like dry, but as a reader, it's like critical.
Yeah.
Like, let me know what I'm getting into.
Yeah, and it can often come right out of an abstract. Like, I'm cool with those things overlapping, but I like it to be in the chapter too. Sometimes the abstracts in, like on the publisher website are like, you know, nowhere near the book, so it can be really nice to have both. So in this essay, I will provide a close analysis of Ice Cap Zone and another level Marble Garden Zone, and detail how timbre, as a musical parameter separate from instrumentation, can evoke specific intertextual and extra musical associations for a listener. The genres invoked in the soundtracks of each of these levels do not have an immediately obvious relationship to the setting. The wintry Ice Cap Zone uses new wave, while the Grecian-styled Marble Garden Zone uses funk. I analyze how timbre, instrumentation, and other genre signifiers in these levels of Sonic 3 connect to each level's setting and to the overall narrative of the video game, and reveal the complex semiotic meanings generated by these surprising music setting pairings. In doing this, I will show how timbre, a musical parameter that remains overlooked in a great deal of music analysis, might inform and enhance analyses of narrative both within video game music, and beyond. Oh no! Pete can't go to the
Oh, that's
We've
sad.
all been talking about the excitement for your paper in particular. Um, I will probably go to it. Sorry, Pete. So I will see if I can like live tweet or since you're on the SMT side, do you know if it'll be recorded?
I don't know yet, but I know they're trying to do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and if
Since
not, it
you're on
is,
that end of the the,
yes,
accessibility debacle.
yes, it's true. I'm the webmaster for SMT too, so you would
Oh,
think that I
cool.
would know, but I usually let other people handle the conference stuff because I have too much other stuff to
Yeah.
handle.
Well,
So
and
we
you
delegate
know,
the conference.
if there's nothing official, it's possible. Like if you were cool, I could always like take a recording
Yeah, absolutely.
and like slip it to you, and then you could distribute to people as needed.
Yeah, yeah. It's also hopefully going to be an article. So,
Yeah, it's kind of an extension out of some of the winter pieces of this. So it
exactly. Yeah.
sounds like it's going to be kind of a nice. I love seeing like stuff evolve in across publications over time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, oh, this opened up this door.
Hmm.
Yeah, I really was surprised at some of the scheduling of like media things against each other. Like
Yeah.
normally that's a little bit more differentiated, but um,
Yeah. I don't know how they make these decisions. I really don't.
yeah, yeah, and I think it could also be like SMT versus AMS. Like sometimes there's not as much communication there in the schedule building, so
Yeah.
I think that could be one component. But if anyone's there Thursday afternoon, Will Gibbons and I, and possibly Stefan, question mark, because Stefan had a conflict, might have to be on a different
Mm.
session. But the three of us were scheduled on a session, so that should be fun. Come see me if y'all. I think it's like 2 or 2:30 in the afternoon on Thursday. So
I've not
I'll talk
even.
more about that. I've been like a little weird about posting my excitement on social media because there's a weird vibe right now around that conference.
Yes.
But I am excited because I've always wanted to get in, and I'm excited about the work that I'm presenting. So
Yeah.
that'll be fun. We'll make it like a little schedule of here's all the cool Ludo-y things to go to.
Ooh, that would be really nice.
Yeah, Disability always does that. The Disability Study Group, they make like a
Hmm.
list of, even if it's not sponsored by them, here's all of the papers having to do with it this year. So
That's
you
so
can kind of
smart.
plan for
Like,
it.
duh. Yeah.
So I think Brent and folks are currently heading the Ludo Study Group. Maybe we can like pull together
Yeah.
a little list and just like tweet it.
I should suggest that to the pop folks as well, because
Yeah,
those are pretty much the only papers I'm gonna want to go to is like the pop stuff and the media stuff, and the
yeah,
rest
it's
of it
like
I'm
you
just
want
gonna be
to.
like,
There's a lot to look through, so it's like easy to miss stuff. Yeah, it's just like a nice thing to kind of comb through and pull as much as you can tell from different abstracts and titles and things what's going on. But
Mhm.
I always go to at least one thing that's really outside my wheelhouse just to kind of like keep it spicy. I sit down and I'm like, I don't know what any of this is.
Yeah,
Keeps me
yeah.
humble too, because I'm just like, look at all that I don't know.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, that'll happen if I go to like a friend's paper, somebody who, I don't know, did recitative or something. I'm like, sure.
And you're just like,
I like
cool,
you as a
opera
person,
studies.
so I'll go to this paper and just have no clue what's going on.
I go to a lot of medieval papers because I'm kind of a medieval fan. I just think those folks are so smart and so like versatile and broad in their
Hmm.
expertise. But then they start citing the manuscripts by like the shorthand. They're like, oh yeah, BNF 1077. You're like, I know where that is because it's BNF. That's it.
I don't know what that means. Maybe
Because
that makes me ignorant, but
everyone else that is there and knows it, like knows exactly what manuscript that is and what pieces are in it. And I'm here like, okay, BNF means Bibliothèque Nationale Française, so it's in France.
there you
Like
go.
that's as far as I go.
Okay.
Yeah. So Sonic 3. Anyway, excited about the Triple Conference. Getting more excited as we get closer.
Yeah, me too.
There will be some cool things within it.
I'm just excited to see my friends again.
Yeah. And also New Orleans is a delicious city to hang out in.
Oh, yes.
There's a lot of good food.
Yeah.
So there's these soundtracks are very popular. So I imagine, as you were saying, trying to look for work on it, there was probably the two threads of like, this rules and and then the theory about Michael Jackson contributing to the soundtrack.
Yeah.
So Sega has just continued to deny this. But you mentioned that some of the Sonic 3 composers themselves attested to the involvement, which is a pretty interesting smoking gun.
Right.
Like, why would they lie?
Right.
And we also know that Michael Jackson's Moonwalker was a thing. So there was uninvolvement to translate some of that to the sound chip, which I think those are really fascinating. Melanie Fritsch has written on Michael Jackson's Moonwalker in the past for Michael's book, but so we know that there was a connection there already, and so folks have then gone to notice some things that are very interesting and similar. And Ryan has a good for more on the MJ connection. There's a Game Informer link. There's some other ones that get into it in some detail. So possibly Jackson quit, being annoyed that like couldn't get whatever he wanted out of the chip. Maybe Sega let him go, tried to distance themselves from some of the accusations that were coming out in that era. So either way, Sega may have wanted to downplay it. Was Moonwalker a thing, or is it the thing? I love that game. I think it's just such a strange little piece of game history. Yeah, heard it from some of the composers in person at previous MagFests without derailing things. That's interesting. Yeah, and the fan base, like the work on it is pretty. It's not just like internet sleuths who are doing surface level. It's really intense what folks have dug up for this specific theory. It's very beloved, I think.
Yes.
People just love that it's not just noticing some connections, like, oh, there might have been influence, but there are some things that link the two in compelling ways. So we have to talk to it in this chapter, but like this chapter isn't really about that. But where it's interesting is Michael Jackson engaged in a lot of polystylism, had a lot of crossover hits that blurred genre categories. So there's a strong resonance here, whether or not he was actually involved. Which is such an elegant way to be like, you know what? That's not really what this chapter's about. But if you're going to talk about this game in particular, like that's a big thing that people get into.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Genesis Audio is really fun because it has both a PSG programmable sound generator chip and an FM synthesis sound chip, which is a nice combination that allows for not only more channels, but different possibilities in sound. So the YM2612 is similar to the Yamaha DX7 FM synth, which was all over 1980s pop, and which is all about the dissertation. So go check out the dissertation.
Don't.
It's a really good read. It's going to be a book, right? Or articles.
I haven't actually done that, but yeah, it's all out in articles except for one chapter. So
cool. Okay, go seek out the articles.
It's mostly on MTO.
Right.
Yeah.
Something triggered Google to talk to me. Weird. The YM2612 is really good for rock and prog timbres. It's a little less orchestral overall. Not that you can't get these sounds ever, but you're going to see more emphasis on keyboards, guitars, and percussion. And it had 6 monophonic FM synthesis channels with 4 operators to control for timbre. Hopefully we don't have to get into like, what is an operator? I think this crowd is at least like, oh, okay, there's channels. Yeah. We can do things to the channels and get different sound. Yeah, I think we're at least familiar enough with that. Even if we're more familiar with the PSG in the Nintendo, for example. So, which article would be best to get more about the links with rock for the YM2612?
Nothing that I've written. I just that's what I gathered from I think partially from Karen Cook's book, or Karen Collins, sorry, that's always so hard for me to keep straight. The one with the book about game sound technology, Karen Collins, and also from, as people are saying in the chat, there's just a really dedicated fan base for this sound chip and for the Genesis online, so you can also just find a ton of information
And
on the forums and things like that.
I've got to dig it up, but somewhere I have it. It was like a manual for folks working with the chip,
Mm-hmm.
and it sort of steers people to more like prog and rock genres, and it was partially like a branding thing to be
Mm.
again differentiating from Nintendo. And it sort of explains all the capabilities of the. I will have to find out where I have that where that lives, because I just haven't. Yeah, it lives somewhere on a hard drive, where it was like an old thing that would get circulated for folks that were
Yeah.
working with the chip. Yes, I
Basically, like what it is
will find it.
the kind of sound synthesis that happens on this chip just doesn't lend itself as well to like more kind of gentle timbres. It's a real aggressive sounding synthesis technology, I guess, and so just kind of plays more to the strengths to stick with the rock genres.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like they had the chip that could do these things, but also there was a conscious attempt to
Yeah,
like have that cool, more rock influenced sound. So it was a
yeah,
little bit of both.
yeah. I
Um,
didn't actually know that part, but it makes perfect sense.
yeah, and again, I found it was documentation like pretty dry, but there were some interesting little snippets. So I didn't end up using it in whatever I had stumbled upon it for, but I think I should have it. Maybe. Let's see what this is. Technical manual. Yep, that looks like it.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, it kind of gets into like what these things do, suggested uses, that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
Yes. Good digging, everyone. Good digging. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking of, I
Yeah.
think. I mean, I think there's others out there, but that's a really good one. Yeah, page 6, algorithm 0, suggested use, distortion guitar. Yeah, so like there was some clear kind of guiding people in the use of the chip, but also I think your connections here in terms of how things were being used in pop too,
Hmm.
how these synths would have been used in 80s music. It was like there was already some idea of how to use these particular timbres.
Hmm.
So, not that we never had synthesized strings or anything in 80s like we do, but
But usually not from the DX7,
yeah,
not usually from FM synthesizers. Like
yeah,
analog synthesizers were much more popular for string sounds.
yeah, exactly. And strings are always really interesting with regard to like vibrato. If you're
Hmm.
doing a sustained string sound, I think in general, and you comment on this here, plucked timbres are a little easier to sound more realistic,
Hmm.
because just the envelope of it, I think, is a little easier to capture without it sounding very samey.
Yes, yeah.
Yes. Oh, I love Chris Kohler's Power Up. That's a great How Japanese Video Games Gave the World an Extra Life. That's a great one. Yep, good stuff. We have some good research happening in the chat and good
Yeah.
citation sharing. I love it. Yeah, so we have our YM2612, which gives us 6 channels that can do certain things, but then we also have a TI SN76489 PSG chip with 4 channels, kind of like you would have in an NES, where you get 3 that can do square wave stuff, another one that can do noise, percussion, sound effects, those sorts of things. So we kind of get the best of both worlds in the Genesis. And we don't use those. We use them very integrated in this game. Like there are, uses of PSG with FM,
Hmm.
and they pair well together to do different things.
Hmm.
So you get into spectrograms, where the analysis is helpful for the music of Sonic 3, but in music in general, because spectrograms represent timbre visually to people, and it's a comparison to like a notated musical score. And for those who have never seen one, the y-axis is the frequency, and time is on the x-axis, and then there's changes in color that represent amplitude. So it's a really good visual depiction of the elements that we perceive as timbre. And I actually didn't drop any in, but let me open up the actual chapter, and I'll
Hmm.
cut over, and we'll just take a look. Sonic. There it is. We can just cut over and show one of them. And it's in color too, which I love.
Yeah.
Is it in color in the book too?
I
In
don't
the
even
physical
know.
copy?
I don't think so.
Yeah. It's going to look way less impressive than.
Yeah.
So if I do this and then do this. Haha. Look, folks, it's spectrograms. So we have the signal from a single channel versus a signal from all 10 channels. So this figure, I think figure 1 is the explaining what the different chip operators are doing. So yeah, figure 2 kind of gets into here, spectrograms. And the point you make here is that you use one of my favorite tools, and which I've put in the bottom left today to kind of be our companion. Use audio overload by Richard Bannister, right? Is that his name? Richard.
Yeah.
Bannister. And audio overload is awesome because it takes, these kind of fan rips out of ROMs and disk images and things, and can isolate the musical algorithms, the musical, files. And so what you get is this very kind of pure playback instead of just recording off your TV, which is what I used to do as a kid to have soundtracks to the video games in my house. Then you're kind of constrained by your particular speaker setup and all of that.
Yeah.
Where it might sound a little muted in some areas. Here, what we can do with audio overload is, first of all, we're getting a very pure, because it is the data that tells the thing how to make the sound. You're getting a very pure translation of that. But then also, the data is separated in such a way that you can go channel by channel. As I think some of you know from working with this yourself, but always nice to kind of show what that means. And so the point with the spectrogram here is when you go channel by channel, you look how clear that image becomes. Ooh, versus we get more signal distortion and noise. It can be a little harder to know what you're looking at here.
It's the percussion that ruins it, to be honest. Because that's the noise element, and it just kind of washes out the whole visual, so it becomes really hard to tell what's going on. Yeah. And with all these parallel lines, when you have lots of parallel lines all moving together, you don't even know which line is which anymore.
Yeah, because even on a musical score, you think there's a separation of instruments.
Exactly.
And this is they're all, it's almost like a piano reduction or something where they're all just kind of thrown together, and therefore you can't really tell, which what's the horizontal line here of an individual instrument, because it's all just in one chord on the piano.
That's a really good analogy.
Thank you. It just came very organically. Yeah. So it kind of helps you know what you're hearing. And I use it not because I do spectral analysis like this, but because when I'm doing transcription, I like to be this is in this channel. And when I did all the Final Fantasy VI ones for our 5-year anniversary streams, I was interested in how, Uematsu implies a symphony orchestra, very different from the sound we get here. And a lot of it is this very careful switching back and forth to make it seem like there's more instruments happening than there are, because you only have, the 8 channels at once. So in the Kefka theme, man, there's one that just keeps every other measure. It's harp, snare drum, harp, snare drum. It's what? Things just get kind of jammed in wherever they can fit.
Yeah.
So I'm always interested in chip allocation in that sense.
Yes.
So I it's a really useful tool. Let me maybe pull up something else from Sonic and we can separate by channel, because that's fun. Let's see. Fun. What's a fun one that we haven't listened to yet?
The chemical plant. What is it called?
That's Sonic 2 though, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
That's one of my favorites of all time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Here, let's do Hydro City.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so
oh my God.
If I start unchecking stuff. bad.
You start hearing all these details.
I love that. But yeah, it's like, okay, if I want to work on transcribing, you know, channel 2 here. I think things are separated here. I'm hearing more than one channel. What haven't I unchecked?
I can't quite see.
Yeah, it's tiny.
No, sorry, I can't see that at all, so I can't help you.
Oh, it's okay. It's okay. Either way, you can go kind of channel by channel, which is really awesome. It allows you the 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I don't know.
6?
Yeah, we're 6. Weird. Anyway. Could just be the way I have the window sized. Anyway, so you can kind of go channel by channel, and then when you're doing the spectrograms, you can do them channel by channel, and it's super clear. You get this like very crisp image, which is so useful. Love Audio Overload. I recommend it. Plays pretty much any of the major video game file formats. For these early ones where like the data is done this way. Obviously, more modern games are going to be using different ways. You may not always have access to the ability to split things out. Again, like if you don't have the composer that's able to kind of send you like fmod files or, you know, whatever it is to be able to like, oh, here's all the different layers. Most of the time you're going to get something that's already like pre-rendered and compressed. And you just have to kind of do your best within that. And sometimes the composers do not have the ability to share the original files with you. If you ask them, they'll say, well, that's proprietary. Like the company owns it, even though I did it. So they may not be able to. Yeah, you always have to. Always worth an ask, but you just never know. Yeah. Stefan is like, yup. Yeah, I think all of us have had that where we're like excited and we go to the composer and they're like, I can't help you. Sorry.
Yeah.
So we do what we can. And sometimes then you go to the company being like, oh, well, they'll respond to me. And then they just don't ever get back to you. You just get no response to your email. Yeah. You're like, cool. Yeah. Sometimes those folks are willing to kind of like tell you what they did. Yeah. I've had some folks be really generous with their time. Yeah. They can't. And I understand why folks can't provide assets, but yeah, there can be some really useful, if like you suspect something is happening, you can kind of like reach out and be like, am I hearing this right? Like, yeah, our work is interesting in that we aren't studying long dead folks. You know, we can often have ways of digging into the actual musical things going on, or we can talk to the people. It's astonishing. So Timbre. This is really cool that all this work on how instantly perceivable timbre is. That it's like a fraction of a second for us to pick up on it. But even more so that we're making a genre determination pretty much from that within like a quarter of a second.
Yeah.
So like your brain is working so fast.
Yeah.
That you're like, oh, that's country.
Yeah.
Like, right off the bat. I think that's that's the Yurdigan study. Let me pull it up so I remember what the.
It had something about like they taught koi to recognize genre or something like wild.
Koi
like
fish.
That. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Here, I'll drop the citation in the chat.
I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's something like that.
This is Robert Yurdigan, fun name to say, and David Perot. Scanning the dial, the rapid recognition of music genres. And this is where they found the quarter of a second thing. Neat. So we know that timbre is a huge determinant of genre. And genre is kind of a slippery thing. You talk to just about any musician, a lot of composers, and they'll get very like they don't want there to be these walls up. So a lot of folks will be like, "Oh, genre isn't real. It's a
Yeah.
construct. It's a marketing technique. It's this.
Mm.
It's that." Um, you know, is it though? Is it just that? Like, why would every single person latch on? Like, there's
Yeah.
something there, and the complexities of figuring all of that out are worth entire books. And oh, look, here's one. David Brackett's 2016 categorizing sound genre in 20th century popular music. So if you're like interested in genre, that gets touched on here as kind of like entire books have been written about how complex
Yeah.
this is.
Yeah.
But some of the takeaways are that, our idea of genre, it's inherently intertextual. There's societal meanings that we attach to genres that will be evoked, and they're going to bring up this entire aesthetic to the listener. So it's the indexing, all of these things. So you would think from that polystylistic musical texts should be too bizarre or nonsensical, but they aren't. They generate new associations and meanings through this intertextuality, which is cool. So it's like genre is not this absolute, you can't, cross boundaries, you can't use things together. Instead, you get new meanings out of juxtaposition. And a lot of the work on this comes from sampling in hip hop. So you can have samples from anything. As we've seen some of our chip hop people that use video game samples in hip hop. It's like and then you get folks that are using more like classic soul tracks and stuff, and you can have those even on the same album, and it still works. No one's going, oh, this shouldn't be here. And usually I think how the flow is kind of responding to the underlying beat, could have more or less fit to it, but the sampling itself, you're usually putting different samples and things in conversation with each other, and you're just generating new possibilities through that fusion.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and you don't have to like know where every sample comes from to appreciate hip hop, but like when you do know where the samples come from, it can be really exciting and funny even. Yeah.
I love
like
whosampled.com for that very reason, where I'm just like, I didn't even know that was in there.
Yeah, yeah.
Or if you look at something like Girl Talk, where like the number of samples gets layered up to the point where like it's not distinguishable physically, and then you learn how many things are being put together. I love that type of thing.
Yeah.
How much of this polystylism coming from hip hop is tied to 1990s era enforcement of copyright?
Yeah, there's a lot of literature about that.
Yeah. We've talked about that on stream a few times too, because Undertale, there's a sample of something sampling Beach Boys. I can't remember the exact chain. And like at what point is it like a sample of a sample of like what like that gets complicated. So we've mentioned this lately, that like sample law is just, it was like a free-for-all because there wasn't any kind of precedent, and then there started being that's it, Earthbound, which samples Beatles with Beach, like a Beach Boys sample in Earthbound, which was then sampled in Undertale. Like,
wow,
whoa, we are really digging deep here. That's a whole thing, because then we get into like transformation, and of course now like you can just clear your samples in a much more straightforward process. But a lot of this early stuff, they just kind of did it.
Yeah.
But you acknowledge that, like, even in new compositions, this aesthetic of sampling ends up having an influence.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's sort of what we have in a game like this, where you're like, okay, we've got all these different genres that we're referring to, but the listener isn't going like, oh, this game doesn't like have any unity, like, because narrative, gameplay, mechanics, all these things are kind of tying together the experience. But also these same listeners are going to be exposed to a lot of different genres just out in the world on the radio. And so we're kind of, and sampled stuff. So we're kind of used to this starting in the late 70s and beyond, this bringing together of all these disparate elements, and then now we're getting something new out of that combination.
Yeah.
Which is cool. I like that.
Yeah.
Like, nothing is ever, like, for the most part, things always end up working in some way. Like,
something else ties it together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even if there seems like there's no obvious tie, like, the listener will kind of make one.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, it's always kind of an interesting question anytime you have a really polystylistic piece of music in video game music or anywhere. It's like, okay, so why are these things put together? And kind of like just by putting them together, you sort of make a thread between them. Because just from the way, it's just like a fact of time. Like the thing that you heard first is going to influence the thing that you heard second.
Yeah.
It's just how it works.
Yeah, and there's so much of that. And it's a useful way of thinking about game music. Overall, because there is so much bringing together of the technology being used with all of these contemporary genres that are happening around it, and that the composers know that they can reliably reference some of these things. And like, how many folks are going to know the Trinidadian soca music? Like, does the 9-year-old in Ohio playing that necessarily know that? But like, it's not going to be like unintelligible,
right? Yeah.
And they might be able to make some connections to like, oh, that sounds kind of tropical, like there's something that they're referring to, even if they don't have like the highest qualified listeners in any given genre.
Well, they've probably at least like seen on TV commercials for like resorts or something that use similar music. So even if they don't know what Trinidad is.
And I think, Will's talked about this in his book too, that like with some of the like classical use in games, like you may have heard it in the game, and then if you then take piano lessons or whatever, then later you're like, oh my gosh, that was Bach or whatever. So it's like, it still works even if you don't have any background. Because there's musical features that are kind of contributing to the overall sound and effect. So, but then the more you know, the more that like you can kind of draw more interesting connections. I like that you talk about genre itself as a topic. Is this was your invention, right? I didn't get it. You mentioned other people's topic theory, but like the genre itself being the topic.
I think in part this was me. I went back and forth with one of the editors of this book a lot, because I was basically using genre and style as synonyms, which is what I think they are. He was taking, like, it's a traditional music theory thing. So it's not just this editor who does this, but he was the one in this context with me writing this article that was pushing back on it. But other people say that style is kind of the purely musical features and genre has all the extra musical associations. I feel like there's no ability to separate those things, because you can't have the features without having the associations. So it's like, it seems like a false dichotomy. So I just treat them as synonyms. Because
I don't know if I have any of my music and emotion students, but we were just talking about Meyer's referentialism versus absolutism in class on Wednesday. And in Patrick Yuslin's book, 2019 book on music and emotion, basically presents both of those things and says like they don't exist without each other. Like you can't have listening that doesn't have any referentialism, nor can you have stuff that like isn't also relating the notes to each other. You have to have both. You can be a computer and like the spectrogram can listen to it without any kind of association, but a human listener certainly is going to have both. Right.
So like, even if it's not, obviously it's not authentic soca music, like we know this, but at the same time, it's still related to it. So you're still going to hear it in that way. I don't know. I got in a big argument about it, and I just kept wanting to, I wanted to keep the term genre, because I was like, I don't buy this whole distinction. So I was like, I don't want to go through my chapter and change every reference from genre to style. And so I think part of it is I was like, what if I just call them genre topics? Will you leave me alone? And they were like, fine. So
I like it though. I think it you uncovered something here that makes it really useful for anybody that even has like the barest of topic theory, like treating the genre itself as the topic, like
Yeah,
makes so much
I have a pretty
sense.
like, loosey-goosey approach to topics sometimes.
I get
Like,
that.
what
I
can
think I
be
think
a topic?
topic theory. I've said this before. I think it's hard to do well.
Yeah,
Like it seems like it's so obvious because like some of that 18th century stuff was so codified and like you said, Ratner in 1980 like applied this to 18th century music because we could really demonstrably prove that like those listeners understood this is the hunt. You
yeah,
know,
yeah,
they were used as communicative devices. This isn't just us coming back later and imposing theory on it and being like, oh, here's a pattern. You know,
yeah. So that's always exciting when you can be like, actually, they did know about it at the time, because we're so used to saying, like, no, the composer wasn't thinking about this while they were writing it. But in this case, it's like they probably were. Yeah.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
that's kind of how it works. Like, that's how this extra musical association works. I mean, like, it works because the composer does it on purpose to specifically trigger something in the listener's mind.
I love Andrews. A theoretical argument concerning terminology. Surely this has never happened before in
Yeah,
history.
that's a very music theory
That's a
moment.
very music theory moment.
Yeah, yeah,
But sometimes that back and forth it leads to a really happy accident and making this term that I think is a useful takeaway. Even if somebody's not working on sonic specifically, this idea of like referencing genre in game music is a useful framework.
yeah.
And it goes way beyond this game. It happens everywhere. So it's
Yes.
kind of a cool thing. So yeah, a lot of work on topics starts in 18th century stuff, but most of those, as we know, are defined by melody, harmony, and rhythmic content. But here, a lot of the Sonic 3 ones are instrumentation and timbre, or implied instrumentation and
Hmm.
timbre.
Yeah.
So then we get to Philip Tagg's work, which pulls us out of the 18th century and
Hmm.
to more modern genres and
Hmm.
genre synecdoche, a
Hmm.
word that I had to look up how to pronounce again because I always feel
Yeah.
like I'm going to get it wrong.
With those Greek words, you never really know what people expect you to do.
Mm-hmm.
Like, are
Mm-hmm.
we going to say that E at the end or are we not?
Right.
Yeah.
That's a good word. So of course in regular high school English class, poetry class or whatever, you're going to learn that a synecdoche is something like saying Cleveland is up by 5 runs, meaning the Cleveland Indians, well, what are they now? The Guardians. The Cleveland Guardians baseball
Right.
team is winning by, 5 runs. So you're using a part to represent everything else. So useful here in that like we can use a small number of materials to imply an entire genre.
Hmm.
And so timbre is a big part of that, as we saw, because you can recognize genre in a quarter of a second
Yeah.
through mostly timbral and instrumentation ways of listening. So
Yeah.
those are pulling those things up instantly, so you can use those as your building blocks to make somebody
Right.
think of an entire genre.
Right. Like certain instruments are so, or certain timbres are so closely tied to specific genres. Like with the soca, like the fact that it has the steel pan in it is
Mm-hmm.
like one dead giveaway. Or like for country music, it's like if you use the steel guitar or like the pedal guitar, it's like, oh, this is country, just instantly. Or like heavily distorted guitar for metal, it's like you just know right away this is where these things are referencing.
Yeah. And Sonic 3 complicates this because Tag and others are suggesting it's instrumentation and timbre, and you're saying, well, we don't have the real instruments
Right.
that are often crucial to that genre
Yeah.
because we're using synthesized sounds, so we can approximate, but it's not exact. So like we need more than that. Instrumentation isn't sufficient. We need timbre to understand how the game references the various genres.
Yeah, this is my not so hidden agenda in all of my publications. Yeah,
Timbre is important.
yeah,
Pay
yeah.
attention.
All of my publications have two thesis statements. One is like the thing I'm talking about right now, and the other one is pay attention to timbre.
Yeah, which I'm on board with.
Yeah,
Yeah, I basically this is where I kind of stopped making the PowerPoint because I'm like, you know what, we'll just
yeah.
talk through at this point. We'll go over to the other things. So let's see. Ice cap is first. So let me switch over. Whoop, whop. There we go. You know what? I can't really see the top of that. Let's resize the window. Fun. Okay. Will I cover up a tiny bit of maybe? Okay. That's not bad. Okay. Ice cap zone. I was so for the most part here it looks like you were doing like the act 1, or are you treating act 1 and act 2 together?
No, it was pretty much just act 1, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Cuz as we know, these were like you would spend 2 stages in each area. And they sound very you can listen to them back to back without it feeling completely random, or it's not a new song. It's just kind of a continuation of the ideas. But yeah, because I pulled them both up just in case, but I was like, this looks like it's just the one.
Yeah.
All right, so perfect. All right, so ice cap. We have our awesome I love this transcription. This is how I like to do it, where it's like everything's by channel.
Yeah.
And you because you're talking about timbre and like what things are implying, you do name instruments. In NES land, I'm always loath to be like, this sounds like anything.
Yeah, it's really hard to tell
because it's so square wavy, and sometimes you can get the whole like triangle channel when way up and the register sounds fluty.
But that's like kind of the best you can do.
Yeah. So I don't like naming instruments, but by the time we get to 16-bit era, the technology is such that, we know more about sometimes even specifically what was sampled in some of the analog synths and things, which we found out on the FF6. We had Matthew Valente on with us, and cool. there's one that was always bothering me as a kid, where it sounded partway between like a banjo and like an acoustic guitar strum, but it wasn't quite either. And so I never knew what to do when I would transcribe it. And he was like, oh yeah, that's a bouzouki or whatever, the Greek like lute. And because he had like dug in, has done some really interesting work uncovering the original sources of all these things. And was like, oh yeah, that's this. And I was like, what? That's amazing. And because there are distinct acoustic guitar timbres elsewhere in that soundtrack, so it's like this doesn't sound the same, so this is something else. So that was like the coolest moment. So you have stuff here. I like the laser gun sound effect right channel. Reverse cymbal sound effect. Did you pick those pitches based on like stuff you were getting out of just showing the differentiation?
I can't even remember. This would have been so long ago.
Maybe I'm just always curious when people are notating
maybe
effects.
It was just my feeling. I just wanted to kind of sort of represent it.
Yeah. Well, noise channel on the NES can be the same problem, where you're like, I can kind of detect almost like a high or a low, but then you go and you pull it up in a tracker, and like pitch wise, it's saying it's the same. So you're just like, okay, like.
Maybe it's just in my head.
Yeah, like, is it just in my head, or like what's changing here? Do I represent like kind of a high-low sound even though it's monophonic? Like, the whole thing. So we have our beautiful channels here, and then let me hop over to my notes on this. All right, so we've got these are all kind of binary, or at least the two here. We have the A and the B sections. Our A section kind of doesn't have a super strong melody. It's just kind of setting up a groove. The B, we get a thicker texture, and so we outline all our instruments here. So to kind of walk through, let's see, how do you have? Oh, you have this ordered by. It's not in chip order. It's in like.
It's like high to low.
High to low. Okay. Yeah. Cool.
It's easier for me to understand that way.
4 and 6, PSG4, YM6 are where we're getting a lot of our percussion. So we have hi-hat happening in PSG4. YM6, we're kind of alternating bass drum and snare. Again, this is mostly monophonic. We do get the hey shout happening with the bass drum sound. But yeah, things are a little bit more differentiated. That kind of like way we create a drum kit across a couple channels effect. So that's we also get record scratches. Someone's shouting hey, and an orchestral hit in this one, which is really fun. Bass is hanging out in YM1. Our
Yeah.
middle voices here are reading as strings across a couple of the YM channels, and we get like a brass sound, but also with some sound effects in here. And then PSG 1 and 2 are our square leads. Yes. And so we can actually go by this channel by channel. So I wanted to kind of do that, although I might not be able to. I was having issues having all the channels represented. Let's see, channel mutes. All right, I gotta look here and see, because it should just be all the VGM ones, right?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I should have 10, right?
And it looks like yours is different. Are you on Windows?
Yeah.
That's it. Okay. I don't know. On mine, it's VGM YM2612 FM channel 1 through 6. And then
Right.
I can't remember. There's 2 different sets of SN 76496, and I don't know why. But then there's channels 1 through 4 for those.
Interesting. All right. Well, we can at least isolate a little bit. So we have. If we start this. Our drum kit, and we'll add in YM1 for bass. Oh, love that like slap bass sound. Or that like synthy bass, I guess. And of course, we can add in our strings, which are 2, 4, and 5. So many. Like lasery sound.
Yeah.
So anyway, we can separate by channel and hear all these things that are happening. But so yeah, we can go channel by channel for the most part. Apparently my audio overload, something weird is going on. Maybe I'll update it. But I've noticed that it's better. It's actually better on Mac. I find it more usable on Mac than. But this is where I stream from, so I'm stuck with it. So we'd expect, wintry sound to be more sleigh bellsy. But there's a whole book by Theo Kataforis on new wave, getting into like what is it, and kind of the big takeaways is that there's an interest in like new synth, like electronic.
It's kind
tech.
of like newness for newness's sake.
Yeah.
Whether it sounds good or not.
Yeah, and synthesizing elements from disco and punk, which is kind of a fun combination of genres to throw together to create this new thing. So what are some of the aspects here that index new wave? We have a 4 to the floor bass drum pattern. We have driving rhythms in the bass. That at a tempo of 138, like it might be hard to get the clarity on some of these like arpeggiations and runs in some of these different instruments. So that's something that like really makes this sound like electronic 80s music to me. It's like when if I went to play it, like would I be able to get like the consistent clarity?
Right.
You could practice it and get it mostly there, but like even just with the decay of the sound, like you're able to kind of control for that and make it like absolutely laser like perfect. So that you get these very active bass lines in new wave. Upper synths also have some driving rhythms as we go on, and then there's just a lot of layering. And the smoking gun here is that the main composer for the track was Brad Buxer. And he was in a new wave band called the Jetsons with a Z, Jetsons.
Yeah.
And this is based on their song Hard Times.
Yeah.
So like directly inspired this track. So we're imitating synths, not imitating analog instruments. So in this case, the sort of instrumentation connection is valid. More valid because we're not just approximating. We're imitating the thing that this is the sound it would have been in the new wave music, for the most part.
Yeah.
or close to
Exactly.
it, because it, the
Yeah.
Yamaha DX7 would have had a lot of the same types of sounds available.
Yeah. Especially the bass sound is very DX7.
So we often think of new wave as kind of clean, bright, as opposed to warm, and it's largely due to these things. And you had a really interesting quote from Bob Moog of the Moog synthesizer that compares analog versus digital sound as fluorescent versus incandescent lighting. That
Yeah.
digital synths are that fluorescent light, that they're a little bit harsher. They're like very, like, I don't know, pure, clean, or
Yeah.
whatever. Like that connection is really striking and immediate.
Yeah. Such a good metaphor.
Yeah. So yeah, your bass rhythm's the real giveaway here. That bass in new wave is often played on synths, not a bass guitar, so that we get a lot of these rapid attacks that are really common. And again, there's no like bleed in the sound. It's just like very clean, so you can have these 16ths at 138 without having like all that extra resonance of your string getting in the
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. Exactly.
And then you had a really good like YM channel 1 spectrogram compared to the Yamaha. Let's jump over that. It's the same thing. Okay, cool. Let's see. That was. There's a comparison that basically shows how similar they are.
Right.
Da-da. Is that one? Yes. So here, yeah, the DX7 bass 1 preset is the lower one. So yes, obviously there's more activity happening in this example, but you can see just like the shape and the coloring, how similar the spikes are to each other, hopefully. Oh, let me scroll down so folks can see it better. Aha. So there's A and B.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can kind of see how similar the sounds are. Even, again, somebody who doesn't know spectral analysis can at least go, oh, I see. Yeah, that looks
They're the same.
similar.
Yeah.
They're the same. Or they're very close if they're not exactly the same.
Especially the staccato notes on the right of the lower spectrogram, they look really similar to the ones above. I should have re-recorded my DX7 sample. I don't know why. Probably I tried to perform the bass line and it was all like muddy and gross, and I was like, no, nobody look at this. And
yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
So that preset emulates a kind of a slap bass from like disco funk that ends up in a lot of places in new wave, and both of these have a really bright attack and a strong second partial, louder than the fundamental. So it helps us kind of see how similar they are. And our B section, we'll listen to the track, of course, but our B section starts here, right? Oh wow, that's a short A section.
Yeah.
Just a little intro kind of thing. Our B section, we start getting this like really rapid harp arpeggiation happening. Let me make sure that there we go. Got to frame it for everyone on stream. Our B section gets this really rapid arpeggiation happening, and that's another thing, like playable on harp, kind of. But like the repetition, like to nail it on every single repetition would be very, very hard for an actual player. Even if you are very talented, runs are usually not structured like this in a lot of classical music. You maybe do a big sweep up to something or an arpeggio, but it doesn't just keep going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. So this is more idiomatic to like a new wave sound where it isn't being performed by a person. Of course, we know people that are so talented that like video game cover artists, friends of ours that just like nail this stuff.
Yeah.
Certainly like the Laura Entravias of the world, like find ways of like nailing these things at the original tempos and then post it on Twitter, and we're just like, geez, why are you so good?
Yeah.
Why are you so good at playing every instrument? And singing, man. Laura specifically, like what a voice on top of like all of the wind instrument prowess. Oh man. So yeah, we get this rapid arpeggiation, again, popular in the 80s, easier to perform on computerized arpeggiators, where again, nobody's even playing it on a keyboard. They're just like hitting like a single note and it arpeggiates around. And we saw this on in the NES too. If anybody has done any creation in a tracker, you can actually set things to like different instruments to be arpeggiators, and you can control the parameters of that, like how far it goes and how it arpeggiates. So very easy to just do a couple settings and make it do a pattern. So no one's physically executing this over and over again.
Yeah.
And we also get here both the harp and that bass are both, as we know, plucked instruments. So yes, we have strings in here, but we're using the pluck is just like really well suited for FM synthesis. It seems to capture that sound really well. And it has to do with inharmonic partials and stuff. Read the chapter if you want to get into that. I decided to skip over that for time.
Sure, yeah.
Good stuff there. And more spectral things to outline that for you. We get a synth lead in the B section that is not just FM. You'll see it's here and it's here. And they're in unison. So when we isolate those two, we find out that PSG1, which is kind of doing the square wave things, square waves only have odd numbered harmonics. And the lack of even numbered harmonics means that the timbre is kind of hollow. It doesn't have that full spectrum of harmonic sound. So this ends up being how we differentiate a clarinet. Like if you took a spectrogram of clarinet sound, right? I don't know if that's the way to say it, but so basically PSG1 sounds a bit like a clarinet.
Yeah.
And then PSG2 is actually a bit behind channel 1. It's also 8 to 10 cents flatter. So we get an interesting detuning / reverb, but yeah, it's like almost like the pitch is kind of like dropping as it decays, which is neat. Often you see that displacement and kind of the phasing between channels, but to also have it be slightly flatter, we get like a roughness. So we get kind of a woodwind sound. Yeah. But we have overall clarity of this tone, even when we're using the PSG channels. So it's not like we're dirtying up the sound here. We're still getting all of these like new wavy, clean timbres. And beyond this, again, how's this winter? We know that new wave is just treated as like kind of cold, and it has to do with sort of the cleanness of the timbres that we hear, the lack of like grit and like noise. Like I think of like an early blues recording and how much just like grit is in there.
Yeah, exactly.
Of course, listening on vinyl too, you get the record noise like as another layer. So like we think of those things as being kind of like warmer because there's
or like
more
all
grain.
The lo-fi beats that were popular for a couple years back is a great counter example.
Great to study too, I hear.
Exactly.
Yeah, and they those are warmer
too.
Versus the cold. It has kind of like a eye-opening
yes, yeah,
severity to it, but it creates the sound. And you mentioned the extra musical associations here of modernity and new wave and this obsession with like what were then very new technologies. Relating that to how Sonic is snowboarding in this level.
Yeah.
He's not skiing. He is snowboarding. And snowboarding was only added to the Winter Olympics in 1998. So 1994, it was still kind of like the trendy, cool new sport. It hadn't been like legitimized yet.
Yeah. It wasn't mainstream.
It wasn't mainstream. So again, that like we're using like coolness in its other iteration here. Like Sonic is a cool dude.
Yeah.
He's tough. He got to go fast. Whatever.
Yeah.
So all of the genre topic, the timbres used here in this level, especially bass, harp, and synth lead, are really, really referencing new wave. All of the elements laid out, and then we have the extra musical association too of like the snowboarding, the cool, the winter, and so we're drawing this connection for the listener, even if they don't know new wave. So let's listen to it with the transcription. Oh, hello. Try to like keep up with it. Here it repeats. All right, B section.
Not yet.
No. How many times? Oh, 4 times. How about I read the transcription? stuff. I love
Yeah.
that. That's a great track.
Yeah. It's,
So did the focus on this one here just kind of come from like, oh, that's interesting? Like, that's
yeah,
not what I
yeah,
expect.
it was exactly that. I was like listening through and it was like, wait, how is this like a wintry sound, you know? And yeah, it ended up I I'm working on this paper now, which we mentioned a few times, that's specifically about the winter topic now. And so I kind of know some stuff now that I didn't know when I wrote this sonic paper, which is that in our paper, we're saying that 5 musical characteristics that pretty reliably point toward winter in video game music are heavy reverb, metallic percussion, and specifically metallic percussion that pervades lots of different layers of the track, like not
Ooh.
just in the percussion layer, like but in the melody and in the accompaniment. So anyway, heavy reverb, metallic percussion, plucked strings. Why I'm totally blanking on the other two. Hang on. This is silly. Oh, a total absence of drums
Yeah.
and something else. Anyway,
Come
this
to the
just happened
paper.
to me.
It's a cliffhanger. You're doing
Yeah,
it intentionally.
exactly. Yeah. So I guess we do have some of those things here. We have the heavy reverb generated by the lead being a whole beat late, and then we've got the plucked strings from the harp and the kind of slap bassy sound. But we don't have like the real dead giveaways. Like we don't have sleigh bells and we don't have like a glockenspiel,
Hmm.
and we have a whole drum set, which is not super common in winter levels. So there's a lot of things undermining the wintriness and taking away from the inherent wintriness of the track compared to something like I don't know. There's I guess my it's like Animal Crossing, when it's a snowy day in Animal Crossing. That's like a very, very typical winter sound.
Or like Feast of the Winter Star in Stardew, which is basically
Exactly.
Christmas,
Yeah.
and it has literal sleigh bells and like all the things you kind of expect.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Sleigh bells are the percussion.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
So this is like, but it sort of makes sense. Like when I listen to the music while like playing the level, I do feel like it goes together. I feel like somehow this music makes sense with snowboarding down the hill.
Yeah. And
I was like,
Andrew says
oh,
even with the new wave sound, the score waves immediately making me visualize someone hitting ice, even without the title or narrative associations. The range combined with the timbre feels like a dead giveaway for a visual akin to Saint-Saëns' setting of Fossils. Oh, Fossils is one of my favorites from Carnival of
yeah,
Animals.
yeah.
Love that sound.
Yeah, it's really interesting to me how with these winter examples. I mean, this is what's so fun about topic theory and video game music to me. It's like all these winter examples just sound so wintry.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you can tell right away. I was just teaching this to my doctoral seminar on Wednesday, so 2 days ago, and I have a video game music composer as one of my students, and he was like, "I just want to say like this is a winter track I recently wrote, and I didn't like read the paper beforehand or anything,
And
but
it had
like
all the
it
things.
had all the features." It was
Oh,
like,
I
yeah,
love that.
exactly. That's because that's how you do it.
You're
That's how
like
you do
case in
winter.
point. Yeah.
Yeah.
And these things don't have to be like learned. They are just these associations that we're making from a lifetime of enculturation.
Yeah, exactly.
We're getting exposed to it in so many places and then you're like, yeah, that sounds effective for the thing I'm trying to do.
Yeah. And I mean, we can all probably imagine winter levels in video games that we love that sound that way. And this is like kind of not that. And
Hmm.
so it was just a big surprise to me when I was going through the tracks. I was like, this one is a weirdo. Why is
Yeah. And
it?
similarly, you kind of take the same approach here with Marble Garden because Marble Garden is even more like, how does this have to do with like Greek ruin? You would expect Greek. Actually, what the one that is a little bit more, I think it's in Sonic 2. Let me look up the soundtrack really quick.
Mhm.
Sonic, is it Sonic 2 that has the marble? The other, it's like it's a one that's a little bit more what I would expect a ruins track to be. But now
Mm,
I can't remember which Sonic it's in. Hold on. Go to Zophar.
Yes.
Music. I'll know it as soon as I see it. Sonic
Yeah.
the Hedgehog. Is it Marble Zone from Sonic? Thank you. It is Sonic 1. Okay. That one to me sounds very like, oh yeah, that's the one. Marble Zone. That's not it. Marble Zone. Wait. Oh, I was looking at the wrong system. Hold on. Sonic the Hedgehog. It says it was unused. That's not right. Sonic the Hedgehog. Sonic. There it is. Marble. All right. Let's do this. Yes. Just indulge me because I love this track.
Yeah.
Just for a moment. Marble Zone. Here we go. This one. This is how I expect Ruins to sound. I think it has to do a little bit with like the resonance on that high voice. Yeah, I don't know. It just kind of implies something kind of mysterious.
I think like the very classical harmony too is like, oh, this is, I don't know, European and old, because stuff in Europe is old.
Yeah. Well, that's the old Eddie Izzard joke, right? Like, I'm from Europe, where the history is.
Yeah.
You people here in the U.S., this was built 50 years ago.
Yeah.
So old.
Yeah.
So Marble Garden Zone, the setting is Grecian ruins. We got Doric columns everywhere. There's a lot of like grass or like moss kind of growing over everything. And yet we get like funk in our A section. And there's maybe some tenuous connections to Grecian things in the B section. But it's not like we're suddenly in Greece. There's just like, I think they're a little more subtle, maybe. So it's definitely like leaning heavily into the funk thing. So here, this track is really not about painting Greece, but Sonic's cool character.
Yeah.
The other one does that too, but it also works with the winter thing because it's cool. This one is more so about like showing Sonic in this location than showing the location as such. So we get a binary form here too, where our A section is the longer one in this case, and even the little transition into it is based on that A material, and we get funk here, very funky. We get this drum groove, which is really active and exciting. Some of the pitch content, the instrumentation, we get this kind of shuffle funk groove happening. Melodically, we're based on C# Dorian, on kind of an electric guitar lead, and the harmonies here alternate between C# minor and F# minor, so we get a minor 1 to major 4 shuffle, which is really common characteristic progression in funk. So here we are harmonically drawing on this to create our genre topic. The accompanying lines sound brassy, which again adds to the funk style. The B section, though, we modulate, and I will jump down. There. B section, we get accordion. What? We get kind of an accordion sound. It modulates, the rhythm from the A section drops, and you notice the but the percussion has changed. Like everything is just a very different texture. And now we get a major 1 to minor 4 progression. We invert the minor 1 to major 4 to major 1 to minor 4 progression, which gives it a very different feel. And between now B major and E minor over a B pedal point in the bass, we get kind of a Hammond organ like timbre in the inner voices, the melody on an accordion type thing. which to me is usually polka, but accordion is such like a world-spanning instrument.
Yes.
You find accordion-like timbres in like Indian music, through like melodica. No, what's the instrument? It's like the accordion that you sit down to play. Harmonium.
Yeah.
You find that kind of a timbre in harmonium. You find, of course, French like cafe music using accordion. Like it has it's slippery, but it implies like non-classical. So you're suggesting that's kind of pointing us to Greece, maybe, or at least to otherness, or maybe to Sonic being an outsider or something, which is kind of a cool argument here. Also, we use a lot of G natural D sharp in the melody that are outlining a diminished fourth. And this is where you get the Greekness, because this is echoing the traditional rebetika
I have no idea how to say it. I don't know. Sorry.
Genre, Mediterranean genre. And we do get a little bit of a timbral evocation of like an echoey, cavernous space, almost like you're in like a marble tiled bathroom and it's echoing. And so this is achieved by the use of channel 5, which is delayed 230 milliseconds from channel 2. At an overall tempo of 112 beats per minute, each beat is 535 seconds long. So the echo is 70 milliseconds early to being a beat and a half after the...
So a long one.
Basically, the second voice enters on beat 1.42 instead of beat 1.5.
Yeah.
And that gives it like kind of a realistic delay, I would say. You know, make it like, instead of it feeling like it's just doubled or phased, like there's a range, you know, of how far apart things can be and how you will hear them as being connected or disconnected. And so I think like that the 1.42 beat delay makes it just sound very natural, but implies the space. Yeah. And funk doesn't really tend to use as much noticeable reverb. So this B section, it stands out here that these things are set back from each other. So funk itself isn't really a match for the Grecian ruins setting. So arguing here that both these tracks are less about explicitly and solely tone painting the location. And they do a little bit of that, but they are arguably more about characterizing sonic within those spaces as the visitor.
Yeah.
Which is cool. Let's listen to this track. Wow. I have to like play with the PDF here. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I wonder if there's a thought. What if I do that? That way when I scroll. Yeah. Oh, that'll work. Okay. Solved it. Okay, here's this one. Marble Garden Zone 1. Oh, it's so funky. That bass. Yeah, so our echo here is giving us ruins. Marimba in there.
Why not?
And we just totally changed feel. Like, not in a way that it doesn't work. In this case, it moved on to Ice Cap Zone. But yeah, it still works, and part of that is like the bass remains the same timbre throughout, and like there's connections. But I think you're arguing that like polystylism, even when things are very different, they cohere. We kind of want to make meaning of it,
to make it work. Yeah.
It's or the way that visually people talk about like anthropomorphizing, you know, where you see an outlet and you see a face. Your brain has a way of just kind of like making it go. And you're playing, so you're absorbed in a task. in a way that sort of helps you to kind of like create unity across everything else.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's
Yeah, this was just the other level that stuck out to me as like not having an obvious pairing. And again, trying to make it work, like you said.
Yeah, I love that. Back to that. There we go. So, video game music really ends up kind of complicating the work on instrumentation as the determining factor in discerning genre, because VGM sounds are often synth approximations of instruments. So if you're referring to the actual synth in new wave, like, okay, that is more direct. But when you are implying funk, like it can't just be the actual brass, because we're using synthesized brass. So like that tells you that like we are doing things timbrally to get to that same indexing of funk for the listener. They're recognizing other elements of the genre. I almost said style. So hope your editor isn't watching. So the instrumentation alone can't function as a genre indicator. Timbre provides many aural cues that direct listeners to a specific extra musical context. In other words, acoustic features of sounds observable through spectrograms can be the triggers for these larger intertextual associations.
Yeah.
So yeah, these composers are assuming listeners have familiarity with a lot of genres in this era. Really, in a lot of eras. So you can draw on these to make the game more immersive, and but the argument doesn't fall apart if the listener doesn't know these things, which is kind of my favorite part and the most interesting part. Is that there's things about it that still seem to work even if you have a listener that has no idea, that doesn't know these musics, or has maybe only very superficially kind of heard them passively. It still ends up working, which is fascinating.
Yeah.
Oh, I love this stuff.
We just like passively absorb it through our culture, I think.
Yeah.
Like advertising or just, I don't know, you hear it in people's cars as they drive by, stuff like that.
Yeah. It's just everywhere. And so more timbre. I love that this is heading into, the extension into making the winter topic a little more well defined. That's the type of stuff, man. I don't know that I have the skill to do it myself, but I do love somebody else giving me a citation that I can rely on.
That's how I feel about all like music cognition work.
Right? You're like, there's my citation.
I'm glad somebody's doing that. It couldn't be me, but
I text with Will Gibbons all the time about like, you need to write this so I can cite it because I don't want to do it.
Exactly.
And he does the same thing because he knows like I do a lot of transcribing, and so he's like, can you do this because I don't want to do it, and then I can cite it.
Yeah.
I love when somebody else gives me the citation and then I don't have to do that legwork and I can just go see this thing.
Yeah. That's like the more healthy way to approach other scholarship in academia. Like I think you can approach it in this really adversarial way, like this person's work didn't do this, but instead
they didn't write it the way I would have written it, kind of critiques. Yeah.
But instead it should be like, oh, your work made me think of this other thing and now I'm going to do that, and it's like we all build each other up kind of thing.
Yeah. Man, we all know that in conferences when you get the more of a comment than a question, and it ends up just being like, well, I would have done it this way. And you're like, cool story, bro. Like,
yeah, it's a very frustrating article review to get to when you submit an article somewhere. It's like, well, what if instead this were just a sociology paper? It's like, well,
you're just like, well,
not
it's
a sociologist. So
well, it's not. So
yeah.
And there's one thing for somebody like opening you up to an area you hadn't looked to, and then you're like, oh, cool, this does bring like a different thing that's helpful. But it's also okay to go off and look into that and then go, nah, this isn't really fitting into the narrative here.
Yeah.
And what's really nice is when you have an editor that is able to like make it a conversation instead of more of a top down edict.
Yeah.
What was the process like for this one?
Well, so this was an invited chapter for the edited collection. We had all been in what was it called? It was called like a summer school program in Germany about popular music analysis. And it was very international, which was kind of a different experience for us Americans especially, we tend to be very international, means like there's people from Canada, but this was like really drawing together people from all over. And so a bunch of the people that were at that summer school, a couple of people in particular, rounded up a bunch of us to contribute chapters to this edited collection. And the premise of the collection was like, we usually import analytical techniques from classical music into pop music, but what if we import analytical techniques from pop music into classical music or something else? Just what if instead of classical music always being the source of our analytical approaches, instead pop music is?
Yeah.
So I was trying to think about what I could do with my approach to timbre outside of pop music, and video game music seemed the really obvious choice.
Especially given your synth work. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So it was a safe space for me to kind of try that out, since it was an edited collection with an invited chapter. I know advisors will caution you against publishing in edited collections because they can take a long time to come out. They can be these kind of niche books that not a lot of people look at. Which
so like also, citation count goes down, that kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. But I found them really good for trying your hand at kind of new things that you don't feel ultra qualified to do just yet. So that was nice. And then it was just kind of, the editing was all just from them. Like there wasn't an external reviewer that provided feedback on it. So I'm part of like a writing group. Obviously I sent it to a bunch of people for feedback, but there wasn't a lot of formal editing except for between me and the editors of the collection.
Yeah.
So yeah,
that's I like hearing about process because sometimes, especially if you're working out kind of outside of like Ludo, you might get very different perspectives, which can be very, very cool and instructive and useful.
Yeah.
But I love hearing about it.
About the reviews I got on this thing, that I still have to make those edits and submit it, but I have things to say.
Yeah,
I will.
Yeah, and I know that I approach, now that I have my first book in progress on that front, like I really thought about the back and forth with the authors and like making sure that like I offered things as options. Right. And wanted to get their input on like, okay, you get to shape this too. And what's important to you to keep, and how can we streamline this in other ways, and how can we bring this out? And
that's another thing that's nice about edited collections instead of journal submissions, is that editing process is more open.
Yeah.
Because I feel like the anonymous thing really lets people be rude.
Yeah, and
in a way that you wouldn't if your name was attached to it.
I'm a reviewer for JSMEG, and I think very carefully about delivering critique in a way that is supportive, and I try to make clear that I haven't read anything that I'm like, this is trash, don't publish it either. But I would like to think that even if that came up, there would be a way for me to be like, I just don't think that this is ready. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
I try to have suggestions and not just critiques. Like,
and
I think this is disorganized. Here's how I think it could be clearer.
Right.
Like, not just leaving at like, this is disorganized, I hate it. That's not.
I think very carefully about like not being that reviewer too, right? Like, if I'm suggesting, okay, I'd like this to be a revise and resubmit, it's because there was actually I'm thinking of one in particular that I reviewed where I was like, there's a kernel in this that I think is so fascinating. So it like my say is, I'd love to see you do a rewrite where you actually foreground this more, because I think you stumbled on something in passing that is actually like awesome. And they spoke to it a little bit, and it went to print, and so like hopefully that shaped it in a way that was useful. But yeah, sometimes it does feel very like you don't even know how to. You might get two very opposite reviews where one is like, this is great, here's a couple little things, and then the other one is like, no. Like I remember my Tetris article, I had that, and I went to my advisor because I was still a grad student. I'm like, what? I don't know what to do. Like these are opposite in every way. And he was just like, take what you can, make the thing constructive, even though this person didn't word it constructively, like for the negative one, and see what you can do. But he pointed out like, it may feel like it, especially as a younger scholar, you don't actually have to address every single thing.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
you can stand your ground a little bit, and part of that is
Yeah.
developing your voice as you go too. But
Yeah, yeah, that was a really important lesson for me too. And I couldn't like I was surprised to learn that. It felt like you had to accept all the
yeah,
revision suggestions, but you don't.
but you don't, and like nobody tells you that. Like you
Yeah.
actually and you feel like you get kind of socialized into just like, oh, they're the senior scholar or whatever, like deferring
Yeah.
to the authority there. And like no, you actually have to transition into somebody that can hold your own there. And it's like, well, you did the work, and
Yeah.
you know it, and you know yourself, and you don't want to turn it into something where it's not you anymore. It just does, like, it doesn't work for another reason. So
Hmm.
that's hard. That's
Yeah.
hard, and that's the transition. My advisor would tell me, a student is getting stuff kind of given to them,
Yeah.
and hopefully, if you have good professors, they're showing you how to have critique and how to approach things, and not just take everything at. I tend to take a lot of things at face value as a reader, and then I can step back and start. Okay, like how does this work, and what do I think about this? But especially as a student, you're just like, it's all true, right?
Yeah.
It's written,
Yeah.
it's been published.
Yeah.
And he said you learn to become more independent, and like that's the growing process, and that it's painful and hard, and like
Yeah.
the dissertation, so much of it isn't about the dissertation, it's about like that transition. If
Yeah.
you've been like the gold star student and now you're kind of on your own in some ways, and
Yeah.
you have to write your way out of that labyrinth yourself, and your advisor can only do so much.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, learning to have your own musical opinions that are also super smart and yeah.
yeah, like you hope you're convincing people. Ultimately, I always say my stuff is super selfish because I'm not on a tenure clock. So like the whole like don't publish in edited collections, nobody's telling me that. I'm an adjunct, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
there's I'm not saying it's like a great thing or that it's properly compensated relative. Like it's not always relative to
Yeah,
the work, but there is freedom there because I gig and I
exactly.
do other kind of freelance work. I've built like the career on a number of different foundations where in some ways I have the
Yeah.
same freedom as somebody who's post tenure where I'm like, I can kind of publish where I want. I
Yeah,
can do
yeah.
slow scholarship. I can take a little bit of time and not feel like, oh no, I had to push this thing out that I didn't
Right.
feel was ready.
Yeah.
Um, and hopefully
Yeah,
that
the
doesn't
edited
mean that I have
collections
a
are like
standstill either. Like I don't want stuff to feel like it's always grinding to a halt, but
yeah, yeah.
there's a balance to be
I've
had.
got a lot of edited collection chapters now, and I like all of them involved me just like going out on a limb more than I would have if I were writing an article for MTO.
Yeah.
Like there, I feel much more like defensive. Like I feel
Yeah.
like I have to have read everything and like preempt every argument. But like in the edited collections, it just feels more collaborative
Yeah.
and open. Yeah.
I actually had that where I kind of had the chapter I wrote for this one that I just did. It wasn't something I had done a conference talk. It wasn't anything pre-prepped. It was nobody for an edited collection on animation and video games. Like nobody did a Dragon's Lair
Oh.
proposal, and I was like, that's not right. So Lisa and I were like, I guess I'm writing on that.
Yeah.
So I had to like then figure out what my are usually I have the argument first, but this one I was like, okay, I have to do something on this game. What do I do? And so I read like too much. I had like notes and pages and like 65 pages just of notes on the readings. And I was like,
Yeah.
it's a 6,000 word chapter. Like chill out. And a few people that read it were like, you seem anxious about making sure that people know that you did enough reading. And I was like, yeah, because I'm like in new territory. I'm not on
Yeah.
anything
Yeah.
I have a foundation in. So
Right.
I'm having to cut down and just be like, okay. It's still going to be very lit reviewy, I think, because as usual, I'm trying to triangulate too many different discourses.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, here's medievalism, here's gender and medievalism, here's Disney theory. Oh, by
That
the
is
way,
a
the music
lot
in
of
these
cans
games.
of worms.
Yeah, so it's like there's all of the topics on their own were so big. So like, yeah, I have to do some lit review, but hopefully there's enough of actual work on the thing. But we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see. If it's if it's just like there in the book, but it's not the greatest thing in the book, that's fine.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
edited the whole rest of the thing, so I'm proud
Yeah,
of everybody else.
there you go.
I'm pretty happy with the chat. We'll see. Maybe some distance from it, I'll feel like, yeah, this kind of works.
Yeah, I think a lot of times when I go back to stuff I wrote a while ago, I'm like, oh, that was better than it felt at the moment.
Right.
Yeah.
I love when I go back to my dissertation, I'm like, hey, I'm not having that like, ooh, cringe, like
Yeah.
look at me not knowing like it. I'm like, some of this still really works. And like it doesn't mean there's things I wouldn't do differently, but you know, it's I found my undergraduate thesis online the other day,
Oh no.
which I did not know had been like put online. It's on Josken,
Oh,
like
yeah. I hope
very
my
far afield.
undergrad thesis isn't online. I don't want anyone to look at that.
And so I like reopened it because I was gonna assign the piece I wrote my thesis on as like a listening example to my like music appreciation class, and so I was just kind of googling about it, just kind of like reacquainting myself, and it came up, and it was like like a top search result for that piece, or I
Oh,
think I just
geez.
like did like Josken and the Aeneid because it was a
Uh-huh.
motet based on book 4, and I was like, why isn't there real musicology that's like better SEO than me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe
I don't
people just haven't looked at the motet, but yeah, I read it and I was like, this doesn't suck considering like I
know.
didn't know anything about musicology. I think
Yeah.
that speaks more to the advisors I had that like helped make sure it wasn't crap, you know.
Yeah. Would you ever go back and like brush it up and make it into something more high level?
That's a really excellent question. I think what I'm more likely to return to is the Gesualdo stuff that I kind of abandoned in grad
Yeah.
school.
Just Waldo is so interesting.
Yeah, and I have what I think is I would have to brush up on like what has come out in Gesualdo since I last looked at that stuff in like 2013, 2014. But
Which is a shocking number of years ago.
yeah. And you know, I know that there's always a lot of interest. And certainly we, you know, like Susan Clary has multiple publications that get into Gesualdo, like not just modal subjectivities, but the follow up to it that I can never remember the name of.
Mm-hmm.
The second book that she did, that's kind of like modal subjectivities part 2.
Mm.
So there's things on in there that like I can be digging through. It's not all Glenn Watkins anymore, which those are great sources, don't get me wrong. So I think if anything, like I definitely have like the running list of things that I want to eventually do. Do you have one of those?
Yeah, it's kind of mostly in my mind. I feel like
I
so
keep a list.
busy.
It started when I was starting to get to a point where I needed to limit scope for the dissertation just to get it done.
Yeah, and it makes
Um,
you feel better about setting things aside.
yeah, my advisor had me start a save it for the book file. And so
Yes.
along with that, I had a like future conference papers, and sometimes they're like things that I see as more like one-offs, but I would like to like whenever I kind of get to the right time to do it. Sometimes an edited collection comes up and it gives you an excuse to do the thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely have my list. And the two things I'm considering to finally submit to the Journal of Sound and Music and Games, I think are a little bit not what people will be expecting from me, which is like fun.
Yeah.
Because like I'm going to kind of
That's
keep
how
them
I
a
felt with
secret
this
for that
winter
reason.
topic paper. Like now the cat's out of the bag, but with the winter topic paper, I was like, I bet nobody knows this is me.
Yeah, that's so exciting. I can't wait. And again, I'm
Yeah.
going to cite the crap out of it.
Oh.
Just like I think this one, well beyond work on Sega, well beyond work on Sonic, just some of the ideas here of like using genre as a topic are really useful framing, and have reaches throughout Ludo. I think people will be able, especially now that y'all have no excuse. Now you know what this chapter is and what it says, and seek it out and cite it because it's so good.
Thank you.
And we especially we want to help folks that are, you know, earlier career, get all those citations, rack them up.
Yeah, yeah. I submitted my tenure portfolio over the summer,
Oh
so now it's
man.
in
Oh,
the
so I
lap
guess it
of the
doesn't matter now.
gods. Yeah, I don't know, does it? I'm not sure.
Oh man, yeah. I always say it doesn't matter if any of my work like serves anybody but me in the end. Like if I get something out of it, then like it's a bonus if other people think it's cool too. But
Mhm.
half of the things like my Cleopatra chapter, I'm like I just really like Egypt, y'all. So
Right.
wrote a whole thing about it, and they like gave me a long leash there to just kind of get to do the thing I wanted to do. And if it ends up being useful, that's cool too. Yeah, congrats on submitting. That's exciting.
Yeah, it was fun that the due date for it was like 2 months earlier than we all thought it was
Oh,
because
that's fun.
system and the way this new system worked was like it used to be you have to have this stuff done this early, but the rest of this stuff can be done later. And in the new system, it was like it all has to be done at the same time.
No.
So
Yike.
it's like, oh, cool. Yeah, I can get that. I'll get that just thrown together real quick.
Oh
Sure.
my gosh. And it's such a lot of work.
Yeah, and it's really boring work. That's the thing.
Yeah, you're just kind of
not fun.
compiling, right? It's
Yeah.
a lot of just like, oh, I have to be so organized.
Yeah, digging through your folders and then like writing document after document that's like, here are all the things in this.
You have to like rationale it
Yeah.
to the
Yeah.
moon and back. Yeah. Yeah. That's you don't
It's just
like there obviously there are job security things and kind of positionality things I envy about folks that have those types of positions, but then there are other times that I'm like
freedom.
kind of nice. Kind of nice to, as I think about like my book proposal too, that I was like I could make it a huge priority to find a journal or to find a publisher that will let me do open access. I'm going to have to be pursuing outside funding, obviously, because like, I think Will Cheng for Just Vibrations, like Dartmouth was kicking in money for that. So like that can be helpful. But I was like, if I'm going to write a book on disability studies, then maybe having open access is really in line with that whole idea. So
yeah.
it doesn't mean it might slow it down a little bit. Yeah, probably. But I think there are grants and things I can be applying for.
Definitely.
But it means that I don't have to sit there and be like, is this like a prestigious enough publisher? Like, I don't have to have that anxiety quite so much.
Right.
Which is
And
nice.
that's so frustrating to deal with too.
Yeah. Yeah, because on one level, you're like, well, if the book is good, like, shouldn't it just stand on its, like, why does it matter?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you want to make sure you're interfacing with editors and different folks that are going to help it be the best it can be. But like, the idea that you'd have a committee that goes, oh, that publisher isn't as high, highly ranked as this other one. Like, like, and then that's somehow a check against you. Well, read the book. How do you know? Maybe it's very well positioned and people are citing it. And that's the side of it that is frustrating. But
yeah. I know a lot.
More
I know a lot of
gatekeeping.
people that are adjuncting instead of full time, and sometimes it is a choice that you make, and it's like it has those benefits.
Yeah. It's not to say like the hustle to kind of get to the balance I have now took a few years. And I definitely, right after my dissertation, kind of tried to fill the void with too many things. And then I had a lot of burnout. And I've like slowly worked my way out of that. But it's taken a few years. Like, I'll be straight with people about like how it was a long time to kind of learn to have any kind of a balance. Because you do fall into the like precarity and like, let me just say yes to everything and make as much money as I can and like try to do my best.
Right.
So it's a process to kind of get there. And so it's different hurdles than somebody that at least knows that they have one single job, but then has all these other things within it.
Yeah. It's like it's
spreading
one
your
job,
time thin, because you're spreading your time between the service and the teaching and the like, and all those different things.
Yeah. I always talk, it's like such a double-edged sword because like you do get a lot of independence, but at the same time, it's like exhausting to have so much independence because like there are expectations though, and you have to figure out, like, it's not like have this report on my desk by 5, you know? Like you have to decide, is it more important to research today or grade these papers or reconstruct my syllabus for the class or
and so often like you go with kind of the like, okay, I'm going to do the grading, and then you're like, this is why sabbaticals exist, right? Like, let me get back to the stuff. Yeah. Anyway, thank you so much for being so generous with your time. I wanted to do this chapter as soon as I knew about it, which was when I started the stream earlier this year. So I'm really happy we got to it. And as soon as the other one happens, I'll probably be calling you again.
Well, academic publishing, that'll probably be out in like 2 years or something.
Well, hopefully I won't be canceled by that. They can't cancel me. I mean, I guess they could. I'd have to do something bad, but I could cancel myself by then. I don't know. I think I'm going to keep the stream going. More work keeps coming out all the time, so I'm never going to run out of material.
It's not going to be that.
Yeah, it's not going to be that. There's already several books that I'm like, these are coming out quick. So the field is growing.
My cat's here to say hello. Come here, loves. He's like, no, don't he's not saying hello.
Oh, hello.
Hi, Lobster.
What's the kitty's name?
Lobster.
Lobster.
My microphone got pushed over.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, Lobster.
He's a snuggle butt.
You're so cute.
Yeah.
I have my door mostly closed. Millie's probably sleeping somewhere. We have still kind of a kitten, Calico, that we got. And she's a sweetheart. I love Lobster as a name.
I feel calicos can be so like edgy though, or like, I don't know, very independent. I do what I want.
They can be. And our friends have one that's like the queen of the house. But the one that my husband came into the relationship with, like, she claimed me right away, and like she was just the biggest love. And
that's nice.
We lost her in May, and then like very shortly after that, Joe was like already looking at the Animal Protective League site, and he's like, "Look at this calico."
Oh.
So
yeah.
So we went and we met her, and she was also very affectionate.
Oh,
kind of came right up to me and was like all over me.
Oh,
really? Like, she was saying like, "Yeah, you're mine."
I've met so many like sassy calicos that I'm always like, hey.
She's got kitten sass where she wants to like knock stuff off of counters, and you're like, get off the table, like, what are you doing? But I think that's more her being young than her just being, I don't know.
It's because they're so beautiful.
Yeah, they kind of know it.
Like, I'm beautiful, and you don't get to touch me unless I say.
Right. Yeah.
Whereas Lobster's just like, please love me, please.
She definitely wants to be all like, if I have my laptop, she's like, no, cuddle. Like, and then she'll like be pushing my hand. I'm like,
yeah.
Maybe I can do both. Let me pet you with one hand. She's like, no, you have to devote all your attention to the pets.
Yeah.
Yes. Anyway, it was so nice to meet Lobster, and really good to have you, and I cannot wait. You're wearing an Ohio sweatshirt.
Yeah. I'm going casual today.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. Shout out to Ohio.
Yeah, that's where I did my undergrad.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Ohio U then?
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. We have a lot of Ohio's.
Right.
It's like Ohio Wesleyan, Ohio State, Ohio U. Yeah, there's a bunch. Just a lot of colleges here in general. And then everybody leaves, so they talk about brain drain.
Yes.
The whole thing.
I did. I love
I don't mind it because Cleveland is very musical, so I've been very happy here.
Yeah.
The gig scene is awesome, so.
Yeah, so I hear.
Yeah, get to do a wedding tomorrow.
Nice.
Just like almost every weekend, because we are in a wedding boom because everyone rescheduled their COVID weddings.
Yes.
So. Anyway, hope you have a wonderful semester. I'm sorry I can't visit your game class.
Yeah, I can't believe
we teach at the same time.
I thought nobody else had such terrible class times, but
maybe in a future semester we'll cross-pollinate a little bit.
Yeah.
And I will definitely see you at SMT.
Yes.
And probably be live tweeting your paper and or recording, or figuring out some way that we can preserve it. Although it will be coming out as an article, so
probably
I'll probably just live tweet it like I always do, and then folks can be excited. Awesome. Thank you so much. This was wonderful. Next week is Stephen Armstrong. We're going to be looking at his wonderful JSMEG JRPG Sounding the Grind article, which we were going to do earlier in the summer. And then I had to cancel for a wedding gig. Or no, it wasn't. I was arranging for Machine Gun Kelly, and then I was like, I had to do that on a very quick turnaround. And so I like emailed Stephen. I'm like, can we reschedule? I was doing string parts for that. And they told me Wednesday, and I needed them in by Friday. And
oh man!
And then the show was Saturday, so it was like,
that's very intense. Yeah.
So anyway, that's next week. Join us for Stephen Armstrong, who I haven't seen like in person in years, so I'm very excited to like see Stephen again. Yeah, wonderful little field we're in.
Yes.
Thank you all for joining. You're the best. Your comments are great. Chat is wonderful. And have a wonderful weekend, an excellent Friday. Bye.